Hello, my name's Dan Graves, and I was a pastor for 25 years. This video series is about my son's 5-year struggle with an inoperable brain tumor that took his life on June 5th of last year, 2019. In the first video, I mentioned that it's my hope that you will be comforted and strengthened by this series, just as I hope to be comforted and strengthened by sharing it with you. Well, I told my wife the other night that having to think through all this stuff again is just really tough. It just tends to ruin the day. But I do believe that recalling the events of my son's struggle and talking about it is some of the best medicine out there. So I appreciate you listening. But where do I start when trying to remember the first day of a 5-year journey that ended in my son's death? Do I start with the intern who tried his best to soften the news that it was probably cancer causing Aaron's vision problems? Do I start with the neurosurgeon who said if it were a mass, he could just go in and scoop it out, but there was no mass? As a Christian, should I start by telling you how I was at peace, knowing God was in control? Well, that would be a lie. I wasn't at peace, and I wasn't sure who was in control. Or maybe I should start by remembering the fear I saw in my son's eyes as he stared into mine, and the feeling of helplessness that overtook me because I knew there was nothing I could do to protect my boy. I don't know that talking about any of those things would comfort me, so instead let me tell you about the people God surrounded us with that provided comfort. People who would play tremendous roles in giving my son, his wife, his daughter, and their yet unborn son, as well as Nancy and me, 5 years of good health and good times with my boy. A couple of days before we went to the ER, Aaron called his friend Caleb to ask if he would recommend an ophthalmologist. It seems Aaron had had a couple of days of really bad migraines and was having some vision problems. Well, Caleb is a nurse and was concerned about Aaron's symptoms, so he stopped by on Saturday to have a look. After a brief examination, Caleb suggested they talk to Weston, a pediatric neurologist, at church the next morning. Well, after church, I saw them huddled together and they were talking, and I was so tempted to go over and interrupt and just listen to what was going on. But Nancy and I have always tried not to be meddling in-laws. Well, God knew how pushy I could be, so he made sure I was involved without having to meddle. Aaron's car was in the shop and he needed a ride to Weston's office on Monday. I was happy to give him a ride. After looking at Aaron, Weston told Aaron to skip the optometrist and go to the ER. Tell the doctors you have papilledemia, which is a swelling of the optic nerve caused by a swelling of the brain. I've always thought we have good health care in our area, so I was surprised when the neurosurgeon suggested Aaron go to Duke Medical Center. He said, "You don't look sick, you're not showing any symptoms, so you should just drive up to Duke, walk in the ER, tell them you have a brain tumor. They have to take you." As we would later learn, Aaron's brain tumor was a grade 2 astrocytoma. An astrocytoma is a relatively slow-growing tumor with undefined borders. In the MRI, it looked like someone had taken cotton candy and just spread it throughout Aaron's brain. Had it not been for Caleb and Weston's concern and medical training, Aaron's tumor may not have been found at such an early stage, which would have made it more difficult to manage. Had it not been for the neurosurgeon's concern for his patients and his understanding of the limits of our local health care, Aaron may not have benefited from the expertise of the Brain Tumor Center at Duke Medical. God brought these people together to guide us at a time when we were incapable of making difficult decisions on our own. But there's one more person God made sure was there that day that I think having this person show up encourages me more today than everything else I've shared with you. Jessica's dad, Doug, had just driven from outside Nashville to Columbia for a conference, or in my opinion, to be there for his daughter. Isaiah 42:16 says, I will lead the blind by a way they do not know. In paths they do not know I will guide them. I will make darkness into light before them and rugged places into plains. These are the things I will do, and I will not leave them undone. That's exactly what God did for me and my family that day. We were blinded by fear, so God sent people to guide us. I believe many times God uses people to deliver his message of comfort and hope. When tragedy strikes, I know it's hard not to go into protection mode and build a wall around you and your family. It's only natural. But as you do, try to remember that God may be surrounding you with people to guide you, to give you hope and strength, to give you comfort in a difficult time. Next time, I'll tell you how the darkness began to lighten and the rough places began to level out as we drove to Duke Medical Center and more people learned of Aaron's tumor. Until then, remember, in the middle of all the chaos, God moved heaven and earth to make sure a dad was there to comfort his daughter. Who's God sending to comfort you? Until next time, I'm Dan.